Hey guys, it's Mark here, and see, he'll drop it.
He deserves to die.
And if I shoot all
Am I gonna get away in time?
these other slime,
Hey, you would appreciate when someone typed on that
hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and today I'm joined by Robert Ota Dieterich, from INIS, is it?
INIS is the name of the company.
Actually, when I first heard that, I never saw the I, and when I saw NIS, I thought, oh, he's part of the people who made, the Saga.
Right.
Because I think they're just NIS.
Right, they're NIS.
Yeah.
It's INIS.
So, today we'll just be doing general questions about games and how he got into the game design field and so on. So I guess I'd like to start out by asking you, what actually made you get into the game design field?
Alright, I've say a little caveat right here. I'm a little distracted, because I think we're under attack. Yep, I'm getting very killed. Oh, I was slain.
Oh,
and now we're back in that weird room. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice place.
Hmm.
Okay,
I
so
guess
what
we could
got
stay
me...
here a bit.
It's safe. I'm gonna be here to the clock. It's nice. Lets me know what time it is. Alright, so how I got started in the how I first got interested in games. When I was a kid, of course I played a lot of games. I sort of came in on the Nintendo generation, the first Nintendo Entertainment System generation. Lots of Super Mario Brothers and Legend of Zelda.
Or the Famicom.
A Famicom. I almost said Famicom, but that's a lie. No, I was in the States. It was a Nintendo. I've just gotten so used to it for living in Japan for so long. But when I was a kid, I had a subscription to Nintendo Power. And in one of their issues, they had this sort of design your game contest kind of thing going on. And, I look at that. I didn't enter it, because I was, was really young and had no sense of how to pay attention to time or anything. But I got really interested by that idea. And so after I saw that, I started, essentially kind of designing my own sort of games, or drawing them out on paper and stuff like that. And for the most part, there was just a bunch of, essentially copies of whatever game I was playing at the time. So, make a game that was pretty much, the first or second graders version of Ninja Gaiden, or the first and second graders version of Final Fantasy or something like that. Just essentially copying everything, changing the names a little bit. But it was sort of the start of that sort of interest in making games. And I kind of sort of forgot about making games for a while until later in high school, when I ran across an article in a different magazine called Next Generation, where they talked about what sort of jobs there were in the games industry. And I read about that and thought, it was the first time it sort of occurred to me, hey, well, I could actually, get a job doing this. That's kind of cool. And so I guess that got me started on the path, and then I started, seriously trying to make games on my own, so I could, build up the skills I need to get into the industry, because it is, infamously competitive.
Alright, so what was the first project you actually worked on before you got into the industry?
Sorry for the snorting, I have a terrible cold.
Oh, that's
The first project I worked on was just a terrible little game. This little Space Invaders clone called Zap, which I did up in Visual Basic, which was not really the best language for making games at the time, but it was all I had with me at the time, and basically, I learned how to program as I was making a game. So I started off with essentially, zero skill, and then I would just kind of be read up on books to find out what I needed to do to say, make a picture appear on the screen. It's okay, well, I've got a picture of a spaceship now. What do I do next? Well, I need to move that around. So look up like, okay, well, how do I move things with the keyboard? Oh, arrow keys, that moves now. That's great. And then, how do I make something shoot? Then I actually had to think about it. I need to show a bullet on the screen, and I need to press a button, and it appears. After a while, it disappears. And basically, kind of doing that over and over again, and building up over the course of spare time over how many months. I actually start to have something that looks like a gameplay. Terrible looking. I mean, it's terrible graphics, slow gameplay. Nothing really great about it, except it was there, it worked, and I get to say I made this, yay!
So basically, they were just. I'm sorry.
And I've been doing the same thing ever since.
So basically, they were just random pixels floating around.
Pretty much. Well, I mean, they look like spaceships. I went into Windows Paint and drew terrible-looking spaceships and made them move around. But yeah,
So, what projects have you worked on since you've been in the field?
Okay.
I know you worked on the localization of Elite Beat agents, or something Hunter was telling me.
Yeah, not the localization of it per se, on Elite Beat agents itself. So, basically, I started in at my first job in the industry, and still the same job I have now, is I started in 2005 in INIS Corporation in Japan. So we're a small game developer who's made mostly rhythm games. Has been our sort of main forte. So I've made games. Well, INIS has made games like Gitaruman, Os Tatakai Oendan, Elite Beat Agents, and I've been with them since the PSP port of Gitaruman. So Gitaruman started off as a PS2 game. Then when I entered the company, they were just about ready to start doing the PSP port of that. So I got to sort of start in with a port of a PS2 game to the PSP. Mm-hmm. And then the next project I worked on after that was Elite Beat Agents, which was a sort of sequel to this game called Oendan, which is a rhythm game, a sort of comic rhythm game based on these Japanese male cheerleading squads called Oendan, or cheering squads. We don't have the same thing in the States. So he said, like, okay, well, if we wanted to bring this gameplay and this feel over to the States, we basically have to make a totally different game. And we talked with the Nintendo about it. They're like, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. So we eventually sort of tried to think up of ideas. And we came up with sort of this amalgamation of the Men in Black and the Blues Brothers, essentially.
I don't think male cheerleaders would have went too well over in the States.
Really? No, it just wouldn't have worked.
Now, maybe if you turn the concept into just a bunch of girl cheerleaders and gave them random powers.
What was that?
Lollipop cheerleader.
Well, actually, in Oendan, that's the highest difficulty level. You actually unlock the cheerleaders.
No.
And similarly, in the Elite Beat Agents, you have the Elite Beat Angels, or sort of the
I never got that far.
Oh, it takes a fair bit of work, but it's worth it.
Alright, so I did have another question that just popped into mind, but I guess I'll have to go off on another one till that pops back to me. So, what are some of the complications that you face when working in the game design industry, or programming, or general aspect?
What are some of the complications you face? Well, pretty much everything gets complicated. With just making a game itself, one of the big things I always run into is that it almost seems like no matter who you are and how much experience you have, you're almost always going to end up coming up with ideas that are just much larger than what you're going to be able to put together. So there's this sort of constant, eyes bigger than mouth kind of syndrome where you kind of say, like, oh yeah, we can do that. You kind of imagine that, you're going to eat this really huge meal, but then you realize like you can only eat so much. So there's a whole and basically it seems like almost everyone kind of at some level overestimates like how much they will be able to accomplish in a given amount of time. So there seems to be always this battle where you say like, oh, it'd be so cool if I could do this really big thing, but then you realize like, but if I do that, this game won't be done for 15 years. Okay, maybe I need to scope down a little bit, but then you scope down, it's like, but now it doesn't seem that fun. So then you scope up a bit, it's like, oh, now it takes too long, so you gotta scope down again. So there is that sort of constant tension when you're trying to make the game. When you're doing it professionally, there's another factor that comes in there, which is the whole sort of money factor of the whole. Someone's got to pay for making the game. You can try to make it all for free. That works for some folks, but doesn't work very well for a company. So basically, someone's footing the bill, and usually that's a publisher. So when they're paying the bills, you listen very carefully to what they're suggesting. Always. At that point, for most developers, the relationship with the publisher is a client, and you have to make sure the client is happy. That becomes the first priority.
So a lot of your ideas kind of go out the door.
Oh, sure. A lot of ideas go out the door, and also there's a certain point when you have to realize, like, usually when you first have an idea, it sounds great, almost no matter what. That idea will sound great to you. Then you wait a while, then you look at the idea again, and then it's at that point that you can say, like, yeah, that idea is still great. Or you say, like, yeah, no, I was on crack that day. That was the idea. I'm glad I didn't make that, make that thing. So that always happens. And when you have a publisher around, you always have to do things that serve their best interest, which might be a little bit different than yours, because a lot of times for a publisher they're thinking in terms of a larger portfolio of games. Like, where does a particular game that you're making fit in with this larger set of games that they plan to be selling for that year? So you for example may be making a great rhythm game, but if the publisher already has another rhythm game on their slate and it looks like it'll be served by the same audience as the rhythm game you're making, they're going to start saying like,
yes.
This game.
I'm sorry, folks, but it seems like we have a few complications with the audio. Yeah, apparently we got disconnected, so we'll have to edit this out.
We're back.
We're back. So that's a section
I
of the
think
video.
Skype telling me I was talking for too long. That's a good. No, I'm glad they implemented that feature.
Sorry, but you're talking for free. We can't allow that.
Right. No. So they're saying, Rob, you said too much, and then, oh, good, thank you, I appreciate that.
So, yes, now remember the question I was going to ask before. A lot of people out there, as just a fan base, they always want, like, a certain game to be ported over to another system, right? And they sign petitions and stuff, and sometimes the companies give in, sometimes they don't. But how much work actually goes in to porting a game over to a new system?
It can vary, but usually, with most of the ports that you're talking about, it's actually pretty significant. So for example, for something like when PSP came out, there were a lot of ports from PS2 to PSP. And in general, I think those projects, each one was probably like about $300,000 or so. So it's a not insignificant cost, and that's just the development. I think that's the number. But it's not just the development. After that, it's sort of the marketing of the game. You know, basically, you have to spend a certain amount of money marketing, or else you're not going to get enough attention and sales to basically pay for both the marketing and the development itself. So there is a definite risk there. You know, so for a while, like when the Virtual Console first came out, there were a lot of people saying, like, well, why is Nintendo taking so long to, you know, release these games on Virtual Console? You know, they've got all the ROMs out there. I mean, all the ROMs are like out there on all these sites and whatnot. They could just download them and put them on the machine. But it's not quite that simple because Nintendo, they have an image to maintain, and so they need to make sure that the full quality of the product is there and that everything works as expected on the Wii. So they want to make sure that they have as close as possible to sort of an original game, the original sort of Famicom or whatever game experience on the Wii. So they actually have to hire a bunch of people to test it and make sure it works. And when something doesn't work, they need to figure out, well, why is the timing on this a little bit weird, and why is it working, and they need to go in and fix it. It actually turns out with a lot of games of sort of the NES era, like a lot of times there were actually sort of certain weird little bugs in the actual hardware itself, and some games were programmed to take advantage of that. They sort of were programmed and discovered, like, hey, if I push a number over here, this pixel will start showing up on the other side of the screen. And some games actually take advantage of that to do certain effects and whatnot.
Something like God of War. Can you remember in God of War 2 there was a glitch that if you went over to one of the bats and kept attacking them, you could get an infinite amount of orbs?
Yeah, well, that's probably less a hardware glitch. That's more sort of a software, like, problem in sort of the game design itself.
Yes. I know one day where a lot of fans were looking to be ported over was back when the DS first came out. They wanted the Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars.
Oh, yeah.
They wanted that remade for the DS. There was lots of petition signs, but Nintendo never did get around to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're gonna have a couple things going on there. One that's probably a joint Nintendo and Square Enix property. So both of those guys actually have to sit down and agree and say, like, yeah, we want to do this. And then they have to decide, like, okay, do we want to try to do this as a port? Do we want to try to do this as a remake? A remake would be more expensive, of course, because you need to get... Yeah, you need to update graphics and whatnot. That's a lot of fun. But yeah, that's one that I kind of imagine, like, you know, I think you guys could make that. That might be able to work. But who knows?
Yeah. So, since we're on the remake issues and the fact that you mentioned about the ROMs that are available out there,
Right.
what is your take on SOPA? Since if SOPA passes, well, there's gonna be no more ROMs, even uploading things like we're including Terraria right now because the other program was only letting us record 5 videos. Nope,
Right.
people, this video is just junk. Don't watch it for a Let's Play. So what is your take on the SOPA aspect of everything that's going on? And also the PEPA.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I was reading through a bit of what was written up in SOPA, was just it struck me that this is another one of those sort of really vaguely worded bits of legislation. I think there's something in the wording which basically it was sort of like if anything is uploaded that the rights holders can come in and request that it be summarily taken down from this site or block an IP or something of that sort. And it was really huge. And a lot of sort of the people representing SOPA, they said, like, well, maybe you could interpret that as saying, like, you know, content holders can basically shut down YouTube, but we wouldn't use it that way. It's like, oh, yeah, but the wording could let you do that. And come on, guys, just trust me is really not much of an assurance in that sort of situation. So,
like, it could even go to the extreme of, oh, I'm on Facebook, I shared a picture. Oh, the person who created that picture don't want me to share it? Boom!
Again, put it out there. Right, and the big scary thing about this is that it's not so much as like, well, how would they actually use it? It's there's the chilling effect aspect to the whole thing, with this idea that some people would be basically scared of these repercussions, whether or not they come in. So, for example, YouTube might decide, like, well, we don't want to have to deal with, rights holders coming in and then threatening to shut us down, and we have to look at the video and figure out, well, what are they or are they not? And so we're just going to refuse to take videos of certain types because we just don't want to deal with having to just figure out which ones are okay and which ones are not. And so that's why it's so dangerous to have such a vaguely worded, sort of scary document implemented. And, I don't like piracy. I really sympathize with, the content creators in wanting to stop piracy. But something like SOPA is not the way to do it. It's unfortunately, got turned into this sort of legislative power grab where probably certain lobbyist groups sort of came in and said, like, well, let's see how vague a wording we can actually get into this law and see if it passes. Because if we can get that in, what else can we get in? And we can take advantage of that. And thankfully, we've had enough of an uproar that we shut that down. So we said, like, we basically slapped a bunch of sort of industry folks and a bunch of lobbyists, like, no, that's silly, don't do that. If you really want to stop piracy, you think about it, then come back. So that was pretty good, and hopefully we can keep up the fight and come up with something that makes sense for all parties involved.
Really, if you want to shut down piracy, then another thing that's kind of worse that's been going around is, what about all those companies out there that are selling used games? Because if I take my game and I open a company and say, I'll pay you a small amount of profit for your used game, and then I'll sell it for a higher amount, right? Some people are going to go buy that game instead of buying it new from the store. So basically, I'm not going to give the development company any of the money for, selling the used game, right? So really, piracy, they download it, they get it for free. But the companies that are selling, like, I'll have to edit that out. Like, certain places out there are actually more ripping and taking customers away than piracy. Because I guess you could say the argument you could make about piracy is, for example, let's say I'm a pirate, right? And I pirate Rage, for example. If I go out there and say to a friend, am I gonna say to him, man, I downloaded this awesome game, or am I gonna say, I played Rage, you should get it? Right?
Right.
So I guess, in one sense, the piracy is not as bad as the people who are selling the secondhand games, because I may promote it, but all they're going to do is say, I got this cheap game at this store, go buy it. And then the game design company is not getting anything whatsoever.
Well, I'm not sure if the game design company is getting much in either circumstance, honestly. But
I'm promoting.
No, you are. But to be fair to GameStop, they are promoting it as well. I mean, part of the reason that the relationship between publishers, developers, and retail, there's a lot of history behind it. It often gets pretty complicated. One of the things that one of the aspects that sort of comes in here is that in an ideal world, publishers and developers, they kind of would like to not have to deal with the retailers. So that's why I get very excited about all the things that we can do with sort of direct downloadable content, because then we don't have to go through anyone to get to get to our customer.
Here we go then.
Yeah, but downloadable content, downloadable games, it doesn't have that full reach yet. And the reason we still need retail is because we still are at a point where there are enough people who have no real option to get games except on disc, just because of the speed of their internet connections or the reliability of it, and just sort of also just how secure they feel with downloading imaginary stuff off the net, and they think to themselves, well, what happens if it disappears? Does that mean that my money is gone and I wasted it, or can I get it again? And so there's that sort of trust factor. So that's why there's sort of this strange bedfellow sort of situation where publishers and retailers kind of look at each other like, oh, we're enemies, but we're friends because we're fighting against this sort of common bad guy. It's like He-Man and Skeletor fighting against Hordak. No, that's
appealed
really...
to some fans, but I'm only 21.
That's a real old reference, and I don't think it ever happened either, but it would have been kind of cool.
Well, since we're on the topic of DLC, there's another major issue going around among the fans about the thing that BioWare is doing with Mass Effect 3.
Right.
Have you heard about it?
Well, I know there's been this uproar about the first day DLC, day one DLC coming out with it. I've been actually trying to avoid a lot of information about it because I really like Mass Effect, so I don't want to spoil myself on it.
Yeah, but apparently that DLC was being made before the game even got released.
Yep.
So, meaning it should have been part of the game itself.
Like
it's a major thing in the story, the Promethean, and it involves a quest about it. Right. And this is the last in the series. So why make someone pay on release date for something so important and waited for if it's going to be the last game in the Mass Effect series? And also, you have that thing about, like, it's okay to offer cosmetics, right? Or give a higher price, but don't go like crap. But don't go off and say, okay, you can download these things on mobile applications. Now, not everyone has a mobile application, correct?
Right.
So, if you go off and download this and you get all these unique weapons that not only you can use in the single player, which would have been kind of fine, but now they're also saying these weapons, if you downloaded it through the iOS 2 games that are coming out, then you can also use them in the multiplayer. So basically, they're going to have an unfair advantage just because someone can't download this free application because they don't have an iPhone or an iPad or a BlackBerry Messenger.
Right. Well, the unfair advantage that might depend on actually how strong the weapons actually are. A lot of times, sort of the extra stuff you get from multiplayer tends to be relatively cosmetic, which I think is usually a pretty good choice because you don't want to screw up the balance like that.
Yeah, these are more non-cosmetics. They're completely new effects. Like one was, I believe you got the. People can correct me and flame me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I think it was a grenade launcher or something that you cannot get, or a rocket launcher, and it was not available. Like, all the things that are available here are, like, completely new weapons. They're not cosmetic whatsoever, and they are not available to people who do not download this free application from an iStore.
Right. So, well, alright, so one of the issues here is that that preserving the multiplayer fairness, and there's certain groups that can get more of something or another, and they can just get this greater advantage versus just sort of how good they are at the game. And that's a bit of a shame, and really, ideally, not what you want to have happening in your multiplayer game. But that being said, it kind of depends on how serious your multiplayer game is. Mass Effect multiplayer, it sounds like probably pretty fun, but it's not necessarily I doubt it's trying to position itself to be like, an e-sport contender. So, multiplayer for Gears of War, they had some thoughts of saying like, well, maybe if this really, really picks up, we could be an esport. So we want to make sure that we are balanced and fair in everything that we're doing. So the stuff that you can download, the extra things you can get, we make it mostly cosmetic and actually really ugly looking too. But people, they can have like a purple lancer and things like that. But they're trying very carefully to protect that balance. But at the same time, there are a lot of people who just don't care about how pretty the objects they have. They just want to have like cool new weapons. And so there is a certain argument for saying like of basically treating people for certain things, like being able to go into get the iOS device to get some extra weapons. There is the person who gets that weapon, they are going to feel pretty good. It's like, I've got this exclusive thing. It's like having membership benefits in a frequent flyer package or something. The stuff you're getting is actually not that good, but you kind of feel like, oh, I feel a little bit special for having this. And I think where it comes down into a fairness question is going to depend on how the multiplayer game works.
Yeah.
In a sort of co-op, sort of focused multiplayer game, it's actually, I think, not too much of an issue because you're not having people directly compete against each other, and you have this sort of thing like, well, these people are evenly matched, but this person has the uber gun, so that guy wins.
A lot of people just don't like the idea of the route they're going. There's some people who's actually willing to boycott the game.
Right.
So, do I have any more questions?
I think the other sort of interesting issue you're talking about there is sort of the day one DLC issue itself. And I'm still sort of trying to figure out what I think about it. INIS, the most recent game we released, also had day one DLC. It was the Black Eyed Peas experience. And so there were additional songs you can download on day one. I don't actually feel that weird about that one because there's a certain sense of that sort of iTunes-y kind of download extra songs for your game. So that's sort of a little bit of an aspect for a music game. It doesn't feel quite as repugnant, probably because of the story aspect.
Yeah.
But I remember one place where I thought, I remember the first time that I thought the sort of day one or DLC, the big sort of DLC screw-ups were sort of the early days of the 360 when you had something like Beautiful Katamari Damacy coming out, and they had DLC, but it turns out the DLC was just unlock codes for stuff on the disc. That just seems really sleazy. To me, that also seems sleazy, and I'm not sure exactly why it should feel sleazy or different from other day one DLC, but that one feels really good. From my perspective, probably because to get stuff on the disc, you actually have to have things done earlier than you would for day one DLC. There's conceivably an argument you can make that the day one DLC
should be free.
No, I'm not saying that it should be free. I'm saying the day one DLC, there's a lead up in putting stuff on disc that is longer than the lead up for putting stuff as part of a DLC package. So there is a chance that the BioWare guys hit a deadline of stuff that they could put on the disc, and so they got all the stuff on the disc, they sent it off to EA. In the meantime, they were still working on that day one DLC. I don't think that's actually what happened.
No, apparently this DLC was finished. And... Hello?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, I thought you cut off again.
I was listening to you.
Oh, apparently this so-called Day 1 DLC, right, is already finished. It was finished a while ago.
Right.
So, really, if it's finished, and it's there, and you're not going to have any other mention or any other reference of this big event other than, oh, the collectors are Prometheans. And then you're going to offer this Day 1 DLC for $10 that was done 3 months before you even decided to put it on disc. It's just boggling, I guess, to the fans of why they would even do this with a game of, that's so great And
you know why they want to do that? They want to make money, and they want to make enough money to pay for the game, and also enough to pay for the next games, or if they want to grow the company and make even more games. I think there's a certain aspect where people might be blowing it out of proportion. That I'm not sure how core the Promethean story will be to the actual main plot of the game. The way I suggest talk about this is, let's say if you think of something like Star Wars, you have the main plot that's sort of part of Star Wars, and that's the part that's in the movies.
Yeah.
If you want to find out more about certain aspects of it, you actually end up picking like one of these sort of extended universe novels, and that's essentially sort of the equivalent, not the equivalent, but it's a similar aspect to that sort of extra downloadable content for the movie. It doesn't go into the movie itself, but it is how you get more content. And that's when you can get sort of stuff like, I want to read a book that's all about Boba Fett. I don't want to, but a lot of I like Han Solo. But to me, I suspect that the Promethean sort of story is not that sort of. It's not totally core to the main storyline of how we're going to beat the crap out of the Reapers. It is a side story that's really, really interesting to people who are into the universe, and I'll probably get it because I'm really, really into the universe. But the way I think that's the same with me watching the movies and also buying a lot of Star Wars books, just because like the main game is not enough. I want more. For some people, the main game by itself, that's enough.
I don't know. I just have this weird interpretation of like, I don't really like DLC content that was completed beforehand when it could have been offered. But then again, let's say they released the game and then they said, oh, we could have included this as a nice side story, a nice side quest, and these extra little things, right? Then I don't know, I just don't mind it, because, you came up with the idea after the game was released. And there was no way you could have included it anyway, so why not give the fans some extra stuff for a price?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of times, like, even for a lot of the DLC came for Mass Effect 2, I mean, that stuff, they probably had it figured out before the game was done.
Yeah, but that stuff was all free.
The DLC was not free for Mass Effect 2. I've got the credit card records to prove it. But
if you watched this one with Total Biscuit, apparently the DLC was free on Mass Effect 2.
Really? No, Shadow Broker, all that stuff, that was...
Oh, no, never mind. I'm probably getting bashed again in the comments, but... apparently now I remember. Some of the stuff, some of the cosmetic stuff were free.
Right.
And then you had the other DLC that wasn't free.
Yeah,
What's your pirate name? Shh. I never said anything.
Well, here's... It's funny, I'm actually a little bit torn on that, because one of the things that I remember from Mass Effect 2, I really liked... that was Mass Effect 1. I liked having extra DLC, because I like getting sort of more stories about what's going on. But by the time I got the DLC, I'd already finished the main game. And so the DLC would come out, and I was like, I was really happy to get back in the world of Mass Effect. But then I was like, whoa, wow, I kind of wish this had been around when I played through the first time, too.
Yeah.
I was like, damn, there's no pleasing me. Like, I'm angry if it's early, I'm angry if it's late. It's terrible.
You're just so used to having everything available that you can play it before it's available.
I wish I could get early copies.
Don't you guys get early copies of any game you work on?
No.
You don't get a free copy
any game you work on, I mean, I've got an early copy in the sense that if I'm working on it, I have a copy on the machine because I'm building it at the time.
Oh, yeah.
But when I've been looking at it for years, I'm kind of tired of that game.
It's like, ugh, the same quest again.
Oh yeah, no.
It's like I already played through this game before it was out. While it was in development, I made it.
Yeah, well, you know what would drive me crazy? It's usually the title music. Tired of that.
Yeah.
The best investment I can think of is if you make something that lets you skip to any part of the game you want, it's save your mind. Save your sanity.
Yes. So, I guess we're kind of out of, well, at least I'm out of questions for game design and the industry, but is there any other general questions you would like to bring up?
Alright. Well, I was thinking about something that you asked about earlier, which was, I sent you some links before about, sort of good resources for game development and getting into the industry, that sort of thing. And you'd ask, like, well, it's still, a lot of these feel pretty advanced. Like, how do you just sort of get started? If you're starting from that sort of base level, I can do mathematical calculations in a program, and that's about it. How do I take that and turn that into a game? It occurred to me, it's like, yeah, that is actually a big hurdle to work through. And I was trying to figure out, like, well, how do you get through that? Or for myself, like, how did I sort of get over that hump? And I realized for me, I learned by doing. That's just sort of a general rule for how I behave. But also, I found that that's really vital for games, and that for game development is that sort of jumping in and learning through doing. So the way you learn how to make a game is you basically like, okay, well, I'm going to make some game, and start simple. Start really simple. Start Pong, Space Invaders kind of stuff. You need to sort of look at that sort of completed game, that sort of Space Invaders kind of game, and break it down into its component parts and say, like, okay, well, what do I need to do this? And you say, like, well, first thing is I need a spaceship. What's a spaceship? Well, it's a graphic of a spaceship. It's a bitmap or something. Okay, well, I know how to make a bitmap. I go into this paint it. Okay, I've got a picture. Then you say to yourself, okay, well, what do I do next? Well, how do I show a picture on the screen? And then you read up online or you read books. You say, okay, this is a tutorial for drawing stuff on the screen. Okay, I'll do that. Hey, it works. Or usually, I'll do that. Well, it doesn't compile. You work at it for a while. Okay, come on, now it works. And then you say the next thing, well, what's the next thing I do? Well, I need to move that. Okay, how do I get keyboard? How do I get joystick input? And you sort of read up and you start getting these parts together. And you say, like, okay, well, if I add a number to X, it moves to the right. If I add, subtract a number to X, it moves to the left. Okay, I've got a moving shift now. Oh, it goes off screen. How do I stop it from doing that? Well, 0 is the edge of the screen, so I don't let it become less than 0 or something. And you sort of build up over and over again doing that process, and eventually you find out, like, wow, I have a game. It's not a
that 0
game,
was the center.
It really depends. Depends on the engine and the system, but yeah, 0 can often be center. So at that point, it's like, well, what's the left side screen? That's minus 400. Then you change resolutions. Now it's minus 500. Oh, what do I do now? And then you find out how to deal with relative sort of borders, that sort of normalized dimensions, things like that. But you essentially learn how to make games by solving the inherent problems of game construction. You do that by just running head on into them and saying, like, crap, this doesn't work. How do I make it work? Okay, now it works. Next thing, that doesn't work. How do it work? You just repeat this process continuously until you actually have a playable game.
Well, I shall try making something simple and send it to you.
Dude. Oh, for sure, man.
The only problem in my head is everything complex. It pops into my head before it's simple. No matter what it is. Here, I'll give the best example. When I was in grade 12, imaginary numbers. Remember those?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the other simpler things, like, I can't even remember now. But anyway, my teacher always said to me, how come everyone is struggling with imaginary numbers, yet you finished your work in 20 minutes? I'm like, I don't know, I found it easy. That one's more complex. I don't know, I found it easy. Then all the easier stuff, I tend to overthink.
Yep.
I'm like, but why do that have to be that way? Because couldn't you move that over here and then you'd have to explain, or I'd have to figure out why it wouldn't work that way? So it seems like anything simple, because I can't overthink it, it just gets into that progress of, I don't know.
Well, no, that's fair. You know, a lot of folks, they get really sort of stuck on, they get scared of seeing something that's complex, and then they don't even bother thinking about it because, well, they're kind of scared of it. They say, well, I don't know if I can understand this, I'm not even going to try understanding it. So being able to get over that and then be able to sort of digest complicated stuff, that's really important. But the other skill that is equally vital is, all right, well, how do I take something that's complicated and break it down and cut it into small, simpler parts, and then, you know, not put more complicated things on it without need. I mean, the great sort of catchphrase that I like to throw on for folks is the whole KISS acronym, the KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And it is such a vital rule that I found it to just be such a mantra for me. Is that when I start creating something, let's say you're making something like a game's UI system or something for handling the menus or something like that, you know, if you really want to support every possible situation, you can make something that's really, really complicated to do that, because you say, like, well, things might have nested windows and they have to deal with multiple aspect ratios and things will scale and rotate and animate and sometimes they'll have 3D effects and particles and everything will be really awesome. But then at some point you have to say, like, at the same time, the first thing I need to have is just a workable menu. So let's start off with the simple parts. Say, like, well, what do I need? Well, I need a cursor that moves up and down. I need it to select something when I press A. I need a graphic to change just so I know I picked it. Let's start from there, get something working. And then, after you get something working, that's when you can start going all bells and whistly and seeing if you can make things more complicated.
Uh-huh. I understand.
Cool. Good.
So, is there any other things you would like to bring up before we close off the interview / SQ&A and SQA? I mean, I'm not shouting out to anyone. Do you want to promote your channel before we're finished?
Actually, yeah, how about you do a little bit of game promotion here? I've got a blog, so people would visit that. That's awfully nice. It's called Game Dev Without a Cause. And from there you can also find links to games I've worked on professionally, games I've worked on as an indie. If you're feeling really nice, you can buy it. It's like $1, man. Come on. It's a good deal. Less than a Coke. But yeah, should I just send you a link and you can stick that into the comments or onto the video or something of that sort? Great.
So, if you're interested in any of these things, you can click these links in the description below.
Yep.
Plus, I'll probably have a little adaptation in the video itself.
Sounds good.
And don't forget to promote this video once I upload it.
Will do. Just let me know when it's up.
Well, thank you for joining me today, and I hope everyone enjoyed our mostly random questions. So, that is all, and have a good night, everyone.